As a trucker, you get used to long, lonely hours on the road. The highway becomes a second home, just you, your rig, and the hum of the tires beneath you. But not every night is uneventful. Some nights change you, leaving behind a memory that haunts your every drive. This is the story of one such night. It was just after midnight, and I was halfway through a long haul across the Midwest. The route was familiar, endless stretches of flat, desolate highway with barely another vehicle in sight. The kind of road where you feel like the only person for miles. I had a delivery deadline to meet by morning, so I was pushing through the night, keeping my eyes peeled and mind focused. Around 1 a.m., the weather started to shift. A thick fog rolled in, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The headlights cut through the mist, but barely. The familiar white lines of the road were the only things keeping me on track. The fog made everything feel eerie, like I was driving through a forgotten, ghostly world. I told myself to shake it off. It was just the weather messing with me. But the odd feeling that something wasn't right wouldn't leave me. Then, I saw it. Through the dense fog, a figure appeared on the side of the road. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Who would be out here, in the middle of nowhere, at this time of night? I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. As I got closer, the figure became clearer. It was a woman, standing just off the shoulder, her clothes tattered and soaked from the fog. She looked lost. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over. Something inside me screamed to keep going, but another part, the part that still believed in helping people, made me stop. I rolled down the window and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" She didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light from my truck's headlights. There was something unsettling about her, but I couldn't leave her out here alone. Maybe she was in shock or hurt. "Get in," I said, my voice more nervous than I'd intended. She walked slowly toward the truck, her bare feet silent on the wet pavement. When she climbed into the passenger seat, the temperature inside the cab seemed to drop instantly. I shivered, though I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or something else. She didn't say a word as I started driving again. The fog outside seemed to thicken, wrapping the truck in a blanket of silence. I tried to make conversation, asking where she was headed or if she needed help, but she remained silent, staring straight ahead with those unnervingly empty eyes. I glanced at her occasionally, trying to figure out what was going on. Her clothes looked old, almost like they were from another time, and her skin was a sickly pale color. But what really bothered me was the way she sat, so stiff, so unnaturally still. About 20 minutes passed, and the fog showed no sign of lifting. My nerves were getting the better of me, and I couldn't stand the silence any longer. "So what were you doing out there in the middle of nowhere?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She finally turned to look at me, her eyes dark and hollow. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but it sent chills down my spine. "I never left." Confused, I looked over at her. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. On the side of the road, just a few yards ahead, was a wrecked car. It was half hidden in the fog, its front smashed against a tree. My stomach dropped as I slowed the truck to a stop. There was no way I hadn't seen that car earlier. It was like it had just appeared. My heart raced as I looked from the wreck to the woman beside me. Her face was emotionless, as if the sight didn't bother her at all. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but there was no signal. I had no choice but to get out and check the wreck. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the thick fog. The cold night air hit me like a wall as I approached the twisted metal. The car had clearly been there for a while, rusted, covered in dirt and grime. But what sent my heart into my throat was the passenger seat. There was a body slumped over in the front seat, covered in the same tattered clothes the woman in my truck had been wearing. The face was obscured, but the hair, the clothes, it was her, the woman I'd picked up. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I spun around and pointed the flashlight toward my truck. She was gone. The passenger seat was empty. I ran back to the cab, my heart pounding, and jumped inside, locking the doors behind me. My hands shook as I fumbled with the ignition, desperate to leave. But before I could start the engine, a whisper came from the back of the truck. "I told you, I never left." I froze. Slowly, I turned my head to look in the rearview mirror. There, in the darkness of the truck's sleeper cab, were her eyes, dark, hollow, and staring straight at me. I don't remember much after that. Somehow, I must have floored the gas and driven out of there, because the next thing I knew, the fog had lifted and I was speeding down the highway, alone. My heart was racing, and the clock on the dashboard read 4 a.m. I pulled into the next truck stop, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I asked around, trying to find any information about a wreck on that stretch of road, but no one knew anything. It was as if the car and the woman had never existed. But I know what I saw. And every time I'm on that stretch of road, I can still feel her presence, watching me, waiting.